Questions. Is the 500 Smith & Wesson deadlier than an arrow? And are crossbows actually bow hunting, or is it something else? And what about rifle barrels? If you want to replace a barrel, what's the best one to buy? Yeah, we have questions and answers up one side and down the other on this episode of Ron Spomer Outdoors Podcast. Hey everyone, before we get started, I want to show you this miniature arrow. I think it used to be a lot longer, but this is how I found it. But guess where I found it? Within the chest cavity of a whitetail buck I shot in South Dakota. Looked like a perfectly healthy buck. Big, heavy antlers on him, a lot of good body mass. We've got a lot of good venison out of the deal. But this was literally inside of the chest cavity. It looked like the arrow had been shot from above the deer and had gone in high shoulder, just went under the spine, and must have gone partway out the other side, broken off, and then got sucked back in or something. But that deer was in perfect condition. Amazing what those animals can take. I'm sure a lot of you have seen similar things. I've found bullets inside of deer. I've found claw marks and rips and tears from fights, and even antler tines stuck in the meat. So it's a rough life out there, but just thought I would share that with you. Crazy things we discover. Now, we have heard from a lot of our patrons, and one of them has some really interesting information about the 757 Mauser versus the 275 Rigby. He claims there isn't even such a thing. We'll get to that in a bit, but first let's hear from Tyrell. Tyrell says, I was wondering what your thoughts were on whether or not they'll come out with a 25 PRC cartridge. For as much as it has been wildcatted in so many ways already, I'm kind of worried that it would be like the 6.5 by 284 Winchester, or Norma as it's called, and never be factory produced because of it. Of course, the 6.5 by 284 Wildcat was factory produced and a Sammy spec cartridge, and they called it the Norma, not Winchester. Winchester really missed it on this one. They had their 284 Winchester cartridge, which was the base for the 6.5. The longer range shooters started wildcatting it to a 6.5 caliber. That's a 264 inch diameter bullet, and it got quite popular. Then Norma turned it out as an official cartridge instead of Winchester. But shortly after that, we saw the 6.5 Creedmoor arise, and oh boy, that kind of stole the thunder. Then the 6.5 PRC came along, and the 6.5 300 Weatherby, and we're awash with 6.5 millimeters these days. But getting back to Tyrell and his idea for a 25 caliber, he says, on the other hand, if they do it and they base it off of the 7 PRC case, there will be too much of a barrel burner. In my opinion, it needs to be based on the 6.5 PRC. But that will require a longer barrel to get top performance. And nowadays, everybody wants short barrels so they can put suppressors on. So what are your thoughts, Ron? Also, I have heard several of your videos. You were saying that you're looking for a Savage 99 in a 300 Savage with the side counter to do a video on. I just happen to have one in a takedown model that I'd be happy to loan you if it means supporting you. So thanks and Merry Christmas. Well, Merry Christmas and thanks for that offer, Tyrell. We will try to get together on that later. But right now I want to talk about your 25 PRC. I wrote back to Tyrell and I said, hey, thanks heartily for your support and for your generous offer to loan me that Model 99 Savage. As for that 25 PRC, it would seem a sensible option for the 6.5 PRC case, but the 25 caliber popularity might not justify it. The number already built shouldn't work against it because Wildcat popularity often nudges major manufacturers to finally legitimize those cartridges. That's how the 25-06 Remington came to be. However, I am betting that new cartridge developments might run along the lines of higher pressure cartridges like the 277 Fury. That technology offsets the short barrel issue, so hang on to your hat. That 277 Fury neck down to 25 would be like the 25 308 Wildcat on steroids. That's kind of my take on it, Tyrell. and everyone else. New cartridge development, of course, there are thousands of people out there who say we don't need any more. Stop already with the cartridge development. But as I've said before, this is never going to end. People are always trying to invent the better mousetrap. And I think there is room for a new short action in a 25 and something that could work well in a short barrel, because that does seem to be the trend. Guys going down to 20-inch, 18-inch, and even 16-inch barrels so that they can put suppressors on. And I am increasingly liking suppressors because knocking that sound off really makes it more comfortable to shoot. I don't particularly worry about recoil, but man, that sound blast just kills me. So if I can find a short-barreled cartridge rifle setup with a suppressor on it that brings the total barrel length to around 22 to 24 inches, that's keeping right in there with what I'm used to shooting without a suppressor. Just the trick is, how do you keep your velocity up with a shorter barrel? And these higher pressure cartridges like the 277 Fury from SIG seems to be a part of the answer. So I'm looking toward that, further development along that line to make this possible. So that's where I'm going to throw my bet right now on what's going to happen down the road. Now, this is a non-patron who wrote in, but I think he's from England, and he has got a beef with people claiming the 7mm Mauser is the same as the 275 Rigby. So let's just read what he has to say. As a famous and influential gun writer, can you please stop everyone from referring to the 7mm Mauser as the 275 Rigby? I would esteem it a great mercy. Well, James, first of all, I don't know that I'm a famous and influential gun writer, but we're going to put your letter out here anyway, and maybe we'll have some effect. This is a simple misunderstanding which has become prevalent in recent U.S. gun writing scenes, referring to the 757 Mauser as the 275 Rigby. I should mention that the cartridge had never been known as a 275 Rigby in the past, and Rigby, of course, had nothing to do with the 757 cartridge, which was entirely a Mauser development, and that is absolutely true. Peter Paul Mauser developed that cartridge around 1892, and it was put in the 1893 Mauser bolt-action rifle, the Spanish Mauser, and that was used against our troops in the Spanish-American War, and that's kind of how everything got started, and it eventually led to the 30-06. But getting back to James's letter, it is a misunderstanding made when reading old accounts. In the UK and the Commonwealth countries, the 7mm Mauser was called the 275, the same as the 303 British was called the 303. Rigby had no association with the 275 cartridge. It was not proprietary. They did not do any development on it. They did not rebrand the 757. Rigby never manufactured ammunition. Rigby brand name ammo sold by that company was repackaged German 757 sporting ammunition made by Roth. James really seems to know his stuff here. He continues, the Rigby association comes from this. Rigby made their rifles by importing actions from Mauser and barreling and stocking them to their own tastes and then refinishing the action. They marketed these rifles as the Rigby Mauser system. When in the old days, someone like Jim Corbett or W.D.M. Bell referred to their 275 Rigby Mauser, the 275 part referred to the cartridge, and Rigby Mauser referred entirely to the rifle. If you reread the old hunter's accounts in this light, you will understand that the 275 Rigby name is really a fantasy cartridge. It's just called a 275. The original Rigby company themselves had never referred to the 757 as the 275 Rigby, not in their own ledgers or in the rifles or on their ammunition packaging. They always called it the 275 bore. They did not intend that people should add their company name to this cartridge. It's a misunderstanding particular to the American gun writers. Even Craig Boddington and John Barsness continue to use the name. It even sounds very British. It has become prevalent and seems to establish the fact to the point now that people are getting their custom rifles stamped 275 Rigby. Hornady is even offering brass head stamp for it, and the new younger Rigby company is advertising their 275 Rigby chambered rifles. The earliest reference to the Sioux 75 Rigby as a cartridge name that I can find is in Jack O'Connor's article from the mid-1970s. So perhaps it's old Jack's simple mistake. I see I have written you a lecture. I apologize. But as a gun guy and one with an interest in the history of hunting, I find it all interesting. I wish you well with your gun writing and videos, and I hope you do much more of it. Kind regards, James. Well, James, that was quite a lecture, but you really seem to have your data down, and I agree when I really think about it. It's easy to understand how someone in the old days was saying I used my 275 Rigby, referencing the Rigby rifle, not the cartridge, the 275 describing the bore diameter. So I don't think you and I are going to make a huge difference in this little thing, but it's nice to illuminate our listeners, and maybe my buddies Craig and John will hear this and rescind the previous comments they make about the 275 Rigby. That's really interesting stuff. Appreciate it, James. Now, another across the seas, but this is one of our patrons. We hear from Wolfgang from Austria quite a bit, and he writes this, more about hunting traditions. Hello, Ron, again from Austria. Hey, there are good times and there are bad times in life. A week ago, a hunting friend of mine passed away. A very old tradition here is to show our condolences and friendship when hunters meet in traditional hunting clothing with a small twig on the left side of the hat, and they follow the coffin while the horns blow appropriate music. When the coffin is in the grave, we take off our hats and we throw the twigs into the grave to our friend. Then we bow our heads to the relatives. After the funeral, we meet in a restaurant, share some stories, and come down a little. It's a good feeling for family members of our past friends to see, and there are friends who care. Now, that's pretty a nice tradition, Wolfgang. I had not heard of that one before, but I like it. I really like it. It kind of reminds me of the, honey, is it the SEALs, the Navy SEALs, who on the coffin they slap their pins?
Yes.
Yeah, that reminds me of that, showing an honor and respect to your comrades. I like that. Great tradition. All right, here is another patron, Mark. Says, I'm wondering if the 30-06 won't soon follow the old popular Savage cartridges into obsolescence. There used to be a Savage 99 rifle in almost every house around here, and now you have a very hard time finding ammo. I wrote back, I said, Mark, I don't think the 30-06 will die off all that quickly. It contributed to the decline of the older Savages, especially the 300 Savage. The 308 Winchester in 1952 finished the burial. The 300 Magnums have not buried the 30-06, which most casual hunters find to be all the recoil that they wish to tolerate. So I don't think the 30-06 is getting quite the pressure against it that the 300 Savage did. Mark wrote back and said, yeah, I can agree with that. But the more I think about it, I wonder if the major decline of the 300 Savage didn't have something to do with Savage no longer making the 99. And I wrote back and said, Mark, I don't think so, because the 99 was made until 2003. After World War II, the popularity of the bolt-action rifles was pushing all lever actions into the background. The growing popularity of the AR platforms now keeps it there, except for the older tube feed models, which are still revered for their close cover work, for example, the 30-30 and the 45-70. But hunters who want more reach and velocity go with bolt guns and autoloaders in 308 Winchester and larger, and I think that's why the 300 Savage died off. As many of you know or think, the 300 Savage was kind of the base for the development of the 308. The military actually looked at the 300 Savage as a replacement for the 30-06 after World War II, and they eventually designed a 308. So that's, I think, what really drove the nails into the coffin of the 300 Savage. That and the fact that it was in the lever action rifles more than bolts. So, it's kind of hard to say exactly, but that Savage 99 was one heck of an advanced rifle for its time. And I think the reason that they stopped manufacturing it had to do with primarily the difficulty and expense of making it. A lot of hand operations. And I would guess that the old machinery and tools that they were using to make them were getting pretty worn out and stuff. And they just decided, with the popularity of bolt-action rifles and autoloaders these days, it probably wasn't worth continuing. But that is an example of how once popular cartridges can fade out fairly quickly. Okay, let's see. Who is this? A patron named David. 2 years ago, I was fortunate enough to harvest an aging bison who was considered to be too old to be doing his reproductive duties. But that did not make him less difficult to get within shooting range. Lots of delicious ground meat and a luxurious hair-on rug. Now for the highlight. I may have mentioned earlier winning a free-range cow elk tag. Well, magically, this 80-year-old was able to harvest a large cow right at sunset, last day of the hunt. I loaded up a 180-grain Nosler expansion tip bullet with H1000 powder and pushed it 2,950 feet per second for my 300 Winchester Magnum Tikka rifle. Took more than one shot. I blame the setting sun, the cow, and my rifle being all in line. Well, now I have my first ivories and soon lots of marvelous elk meat. So many thanks, Ron, for helping this old dog take on new adventures. Sincerely, Dave. Well, Dave, that is a great story. An 80-year-old going out bison and elk hunting, shooting a 300 Win Mag. Love it. Keep up the good work. There's hope for the rest of us. Another patron, Brian. I hope this finds you and your family well. It does, Brian. Thank you. I'm having a custom 7mm Remington Magnum built. The gunsmith likes Douglas barrels. I told him to stick with what he works with. He asked me to confirm that I'm okay with Douglas, and he said he can work with any top-tier barrel manufacturer. Do you have a preference? I'm living in Wisconsin. We have plenty of great local choices. Thoughts on twist rate? Skip Lee creates custom loads for me. He always starts with Barnes bullets. I've had great success with them. 160 LRX, 168 grain LRX, 150 grain TTSX, and 140 grain LRX in priority order. I will be attempting to load those bullets. You have other monolithic bullets you like better than Barnes? If so, would they change your thoughts on twist rate? Brian. Yeah, Brian, I don't know what to tell you on barrels. Everyone has his, this is the best and that's the worst. And you just hear it bounces all over. But there are so many great brands out there. And you've got adherents and proponents of them. So, I don't know, take your pick. I would tend to trust my gunsmith. If he's been working with Douglas barrels for years and years and he finds them to be consistent and good accuracy, why not? But you can look for like Lilja and Krager, HS Precision, Hart barrels, Bartline, Proof barrels, if you want to go with that carbon wrap that everybody is excited about now. Schillen barrels, gosh, there's so many. And I know there are good 4 or 5 of them in Wisconsin, so you shouldn't have any trouble. As for twist rate, again, talk to your gunsmith, but so many people get worked up over twist rate these days. It's kind of amazing. Yes, the new long bullets require faster twist rates. So if you're thinking of going with bullets longer than the ones you mentioned, the 168 LRX is probably designed to stabilize in a 1 in 10 twist. But if you want to go with some of the new 175, 178 extreme long bullets, even 190s, I think they're up to in the 7s now. If you want to shoot something like that, you are going to need faster twist rate. But I think you're spot on with your bullet choices for big game hunting with this. I've been using similar bullets for a long time in those, and they're just deadly. So I think you're right on with a 1 in 10, but there's no drawback to stepping up your twist rate, even if you're shooting the shorter bullets. Go with a 1 in 9 or a 1 in 8, and you're going to cover the waterfront. If you ever do decide to go to a really long bullet, it should stabilize, and if you don't ever use anything but your 140 grains, they're still going to be accurate. There's no such thing as overstabilization as affecting accuracy. A tiny, tiny degree has been proven for bench rest shooting, but for hunting, it really doesn't matter. They're going to be accurate enough. So that's my advice on that one. But talk to your gunsmith. He might have other ideas. Okay. All right, let's see what some folks have to say about crossbows. I sort of took a chance and did a video on crossbow hunting. Even though I'm mostly known as a rifleman and you folks are interested in rifles, crossbows give us an option, and I found that they are quite similar to rifles in how they're used. So I thought I would share how I jumped into the crossbow game. And boy, did I get some static from people who don't think crossbows are really bows. And I knew that was going to happen because this argument has been going on for probably ever since they invented the first compound bow. It's like, what is real archery? So I'm inviting you all to weigh in on this one. I'll share a few comments from some of our viewers, and that'll give you some juices to stir. Here is Scott, and he says, I have no issue with crossbows, but it's important to tell the truth. If any of the longbow variants, the longbow, the recurve, the compound, the energy in those that drives a projectile is stored in you through your draw and your hold. With guns and crossbows, that energy that drives a projectile is stored in the propellant or the limbs and held by a mechanical trigger. So like it or not, the fact of the matter is that a crossbow is kind of a gun. How convenient it is to use bows compared to crossbows or other guns is not relevant to whether a crossbow is a gun. I wrote back, I said, yeah, that's a fair point, Scott. But one can also note that crossbows fire arrows, or bolts as they're sometimes called, and those are steered by vanes and not short bullets spun down a tightly rifled barrel, which further muddies the waters. Bottom line, call it what you will, the fact is that crossbows are an effective short-range tool that delivers projectiles capable of killing animals. Where legal, each hunter can choose for him or herself whether to hire one. So long as the resource is properly managed and utilized, crossbows are no better nor worse than flintlock muzzleloaders or caplocks or inlines or single-shot rimfires or center-fire lever-action repeaters or bolt-action scope 30-06s, long-range AR platform rifles with 10-shot magazines and computerized rangefinders. And even the 4 to 25 by 56 millimeter illuminated reticle scope that whistles Dixie each time you score a hit. The high-tech hunter might have an advantage over the longbow hunter, but each got to decide what they were going to use. I hope your choices give you satisfaction and joy in your time of field. Cheers. Well, that didn't settle it by any means. Scott wrote back and said, hey, I agree. I live in Illinois, and not too long ago there was this debate raging about classifying crossbows as guns or archery equipment with respect to which season they would be legal in. The archery people won out via means that I thought were dishonest. As I understand it, crossbows are now allowed in archery season here. My low-level discontent about the decision is twofold. One, I don't think it's fair to the vertical bow hunters who must work harder at their craft to be successful. And two, more deer would likely be harvested by archery hunters using crossbows, which takes a bigger bite out of the deer harvest apple. Increasing archery harvest makes it unlikely that the meager gun season could get a day or two added. However, like I wrote, I have nothing against using crossbows so long as they are recognized for what they truly are. Thanks. And I wrote back again and said, Scott, yep, it's difficult to please everybody. The ultimate solution might be one season, regardless of the tools used. The argument can be made that primitive tools, I don't like to call them weapons, which implies battle, assault and battery, or murder, but weapons that users tried to cheat the system with by wanting special seasons for them alone. Pretty soon you have the bow season, the compound bow season, the crossbow season, the flintlock season, the matchlock season, the buckshot season. It gets pretty messy after a while, so what's the answer, guys? Are we going to have a limited season for every device that you can use to take a deer? Or should we just put it out there and say, use whatever you want? If you decide you're a better bow hunter, you don't like rifles, go with the bow. I don't know what to tell you, guys. I don't think we're ever going to get this thing decided. And the proof of that is the different states that have different regulations. Some allow crossbows in the bow season, some do not. Some have special seasons for muzzleloaders, some do not. Who knows? Plays your money and takes your chances. Let's see. Indonesia has something to say about crossbows. A crossbow shoots a projectile with a broadhead. That's archery, whether you like it or not. There you go. All right, now we've got a bunch of people weighing in on the 500 Smith & Wesson. I got brave and grabbed a 500 Smith & Wesson revolver. They loaned it to me at no cost, just so I could review it, shoot it up, and do a video.
They loaned it so you could shoot your YouTube plaque.
And they mostly loaned it to me so I could shoot a 50 caliber hole in my YouTube plaque to celebrate 500,000 subscribers. So yes, we'll take that. But of course, I had to do a full review on this monster handgun, calling it the biggest, most powerful handgun in the world. Oh boy, I knew when I said that I was going to get some grief, and I got some. Here's one from Jonathan. The 500 Bushwhacker is more powerful than a 500 Smith & Wesson. Okay, Jonathan, you won that round. But here comes Winkler. Winkler says, the most powerful is the Pfeiffer Zaliska 600 Nitro Express. To which I wrote back and said, yeah, I'll bet right now some guy's in his shop cranking out his 700 Nitro Express handgun. Oh, man, got to beat the Joneses. Okay, here is someone with a little more serious response. Steve Kelly 2341. Honest question. Is there anything the 500 can take down that the 458 Casull cannot? Or was the 500 made by Smith & Wesson just so they can say that they have the most powerful revolver? And somebody else wrote back, Litsky wrote back to Steve and said, hey, is there anything the 454 can take down that a 22 long rifle can't? And that's a fair point, because if we often comment on here, the 22 long rifle has been documented to take down grizzly bears, polar bears, Cape buffalo, and elephants, everything. It's the right bullet in the right place, guys. That doesn't mean I'm going to choose the 22 long rifle over the 500 Smith & Wesson if there's a bear charging me or an elephant. But the point is well made, It's really not the energy, guys. It's the right bullet in the right place. And if you want to hear more about that, check out our video interview of Phil Shoemaker, the master guide up in Alaska, who had to defend some of his fishing clients by shooting a brown bear that was charging with a 9mm handgun, the little 9mm. And he killed the bear with that little thing. Not instantly, but fairly quickly with just 4 shots. So that's kind of how that stuff works. Let's see, Busta Bass. I've heard from Busta before. He's a pretty good, consistent listener. Hey, you remove the standard rear sight and affix a Picatinny-style mount to the revolver using the rear sight holes. The mount is readily available on Amazon and other sales outlets. From there, you can mount the type of scope desired to the revolver. Yeah, Busta, thanks for that. I heard from several other people on that one. During this video, I noted that I didn't see any place to mount a scope on this big revolver, Smith & Wesson revolver. And I thought maybe that was intentional so that people did not mount scopes on it and then have them torn up by the recoil. I did some recoil numbers on this thing, and it's about a 4.4 pound handgun. And if you're shooting big 500 grain bullets in it, generates a lot of recoil. And I came up with a calculated figure of 57 foot-pounds of energy. And to put that in perspective, in an 8-pound rifle shooting a 30-06, 180 grain bullet around 28, 50 feet per second, you're probably generating around 23 to 24 foot-pounds of energy. So this isn't a handgun, and it's going to hurt a lot more. So that's kind of the situation on recoil. But apparently, people do put big optics on there.
Should we redo a video and put an optics on there?
Well, that's another point that I want to make. A lot of people said, you dummy, just take off the rear sight and put on a scope. And it's, wait a minute. They loaned me this revolver to shoot the plaque, and I did a little review with it. I don't know that they want me screwing around, messing up the screws and taking off the sight and perhaps losing it. I suspect I could call and get permission and stuff, but I don't know that I want to go through all the trouble of getting the scope, getting the mounts, putting it all on there. I don't know.Maybe I should. What do you guys think? Because I heard from other folks saying, you're about 10 years late for this, Ron. And, of course, that's not the point. I wasn't saying, look at the latest, greatest new cartridge, 500 Smith & Wesson. I was just reviewing it for the first time for me. And you guys have got to realize that just because you are familiar with a particular cartridge or rifle or handgun or anything, and it's old hat, you can't chew anybody out for discussing it or covering it, because there's babies born every minute. New people are coming into the world and they don't know anything when they get here. They have to learn it all the same as you and I did. So covering an old cartridge, if it's 10 years old or 20 or 200, it's new to somebody. And that's why we cover it. So, but those are fair comments, guys, and I appreciate all of it, especially parts about how I should do things better and how I could mount a scope on something. I just didn't want to go tearing into this gun and find out that, oops, I shouldn't have taken that screw off because I was having trouble with the open sights. For those of you who haven't seen it yet, I was not shooting well. I got a pretty good group at about 25 yards, but they were always shooting to the left. And I would move that rear sight as far as I could, and I could not get things to move. And I even had a friend come over, and I said, here, you try this. Same issue. Not quite as bad as mine, but he had that same issue. And neither one of us could hit the 12-inch square paper target at 50 yards. Now, some folks said I did hit right on the edge of it with 2 shots. And I reviewed the video, and sure enough, I can see the backer board getting hit right on the edge of the paper. And I was aiming at that point during that because I knew I was shooting to the left. I intentionally held to the right and said, I'm going to hold on the right edge of the target and see where it hits. And that's where it hit. So somehow I was suddenly shooting accurately. So it's probably my eyes. I said, given my vision, I cannot see the rear sight, the front sight, and the target clearly enough to make a good sight picture, especially the front post. And that's the main one. You're supposed to concentrate on that front post when you're sighting a handgun and let the target kind of blur. And I was trying all these things, and I couldn't get a good sharp image of that front post. Distance was quite right for my glasses or my eyes, so I'm kind of stuck in Never Never Land with open sights on handguns. And a lot of folks wrote to say they had the same problem, and that's why I should have put the scope on. So maybe we will find a scope and mount that thing. I'm sure I could find some good mounts somewhere. Well, write in and let me know if I should do that before I have to send this handgun back. All right, what's Tommy got to say? Tommy said, oh, this is a good question, Tommy. Why do we gun guys almost never agree on anything? It's getting tiring. I wrote back and said, yeah, Tommy, no kidding. The Ram, Chevy, and Ford guys can't agree either, nor can any political parties. Our society seems to be hell-bent on being disagreeable. Tommy wrote back and said, agreed. If one likes something, guns, trucks, anything else, let them be or be glad that they have something they like and appreciate. That's it. Take care. Good attitude, Tommy. All right, let's see what Winchester has to say. Hi, Ron. Quick note about your suggestion with bore sighting an AR-15. You mentioned just to remove the lower from the upper, which will allow you to see down the barrel. However, all you really have to do is remove the bolt carrier group and the charging handle, which will allow you to keep the lower intact, connected to the upper, so you could more easily secure it in a vise or on a lead sled and such. Even if you do remove the lower from the upper, you're still going to have to remove the bolt carrier group and charging handle, so you might as well just leave the lower attached to provide some stability while bore sighting. Well, bingo, Winchester, you nailed it. Why didn't I think of that? Mainly because I don't mess with ARs all that much. I have done the whole thing, dismantling them and putting different barrels and uppers on them and different things, but I just didn't think about, of course, you can slide out the bolt, the carrier, and the whole thing, and just look right down the receiver, down the barrel, and there you go, you're bore sighting. So thanks for that good tip. I'm imagining most AR shooters out there already knew that. Brandon, dear Ron, I've been watching another YouTube channel. I figured, given that company name, that they would be a good group of hunters. Well, they shot at last light, and then they go back to find the deer in the morning, and they've lost multiple animals to scavengers, and they're unable to find them, and this drives me crazy. It makes us all look bad to anti-hunters. Yeah, good point, Brandon. And that brings up the issue of long-range shooting as well as last light shooting. Seems to me the worst thing you can do is take a shot at last light at long distance, because boy, it's tough to tell exactly where that animal was. If it's way out there, it's harder to see to make a clean shot, and after the shot, it's hard to see what the effect of that shot was. Did you miss? Did you graze? Did you gut shoot? Did you hit a leg? You just don't know. And then you have to go find the spot, and by the time you get there, it's probably too dark to find any sign for hair or blood or anything to indicate a hit. Whew, it's just not a good idea. But boy, I have noticed this, especially with bow hunters over the years, and I'm talking 30, 40 years ago. They make a hit at last light, and they say, well, let's leave him alone and come back in the morning, because they don't want to bump a wounded animal and have him run farther. They figure If he's been shot and he's undisturbed, he really doesn't know anyone's around. He might think he got poked by another buck or who knows what. He runs off a distance and lies down, and there he'll be. But yes, if you have lots of coyotes around, or cougars, and I have had both. I've had coyotes get a buck we couldn't find. It was actually my buddy's wife had shot it, and it was at last light, and by the time we got there to help look for it, she couldn't even remember which direction it was that she had shot it. And in the dark, we couldn't find it, and we looked for about an hour. We went back to the ranch to get some better flashlights, and we came back, I think, 2 hours later, and the coyotes had eaten about half of that deer already. Wow, that's a lot of coyotes. But another time I was hunting in Idaho in Big Canyon country, and we had to leave the deer out there because of the steep canyons and all. Getting it out would have just been miserable in the dark. We got over to it, and we put our jackets over it, and we urinated around it, left a lot of man scent. Came back the next morning, and it looked like a cougar had crawled into the back and nibbled on the back. Maybe it was coyotes. But that kind of stuff can happen. So I think we really need to consider, should I take that shot? I know it's darn tempting if you've been sitting in a tree or a blind or even stalking all day and you finally get that shot and it is legal light. It's kind of hard to pass it up. But boy, if conditions aren't just perfect for recovering game, you really need to consider whether you should take that shot. So I think we're going to leave it up to every individual, but it calls into that question, ethics. What are your personal ethics? Regardless of what the rules, regulations, and laws are, we all have to live by our own personal ethics. So, Brandon, thanks for bringing that up. About all I can say is that all of us need to do some contemplative thinking on this whole subject and decide what we think is best. Okay. I don't know where these questions or answers or complaints come from, but I really like the fact that the location is on here. I don't get that on
They come from our website.
Come from our website.
Yes.
Betsy pulls them off of our questions category and comments category on the website, right?
Correct.
Yeah, I never see that.
I can show you how to do that.
That would be good. So, guys, you can write me responding to these podcasts in the comment section on YouTube, or you can go to my regular YouTube channel, comment on those right there, and I glance at those. I can't read all of them, obviously, because some of them will come in years after I produced the thing, but that's one location. You can also go to ronspomeroutdoors.com, our website, and there's a comment line up on top, I guess, and you click on that. It gives you a space in which you can say, hey, Ron, you're full of it. So go there, and that's how you get on the part here where it tells you where you're from. All right, let's go to Wyoming, where we hear from Mark. I have a collection of firearms in calibers 30-30, 6.5 Creedmoor, 308 Winchester, 30-06. I'm trying to figure out if I have all the bases covered. I really wanted that one rifle to do it all, and I like shooting the 30-06 the least because it's so heavy to pack around. My favorite is the 308, and I hardly ever have to shoot over 300 yards. What would be the one cartridge I should use to hunt the wild game of Western North America? I'm mostly interested in deer and elk. Well, welcome to the party, Mark. You're one of us. This is what most of us do, and most of us worry and debate about. And I would have to say that you're kind of redundant in what you currently have. 30-30, that's a 30 caliber that's really good for woods hunting or anything close-ish range, especially for deer. So if you're working in the woods and expecting shots at 50 to 100 yards, great rifle and cartridge to use for that. But the 308 Winchester shoots the same caliber bullets, but it can shoot the more efficient bullets and a lot faster. That is one that you can use at 50 yards or 100 yards or 300 yards or 400 yards. The 30-06 is just the 308 on steroids. Expect about 100 feet per second more velocity with the same bullet. Don't always get it with factory loads, but it has more capacity, and you can certainly do that. But those two are almost twins. So keeping both of those and the 30-30. Now the 6.5 Creedmoor gives you a bit more of a lighter recoiling rifle, good for pronghorn, smaller deer, but gosh, a lot of guys out here in the West use it for elk quite successfully. Gets used for moose and bears and everything else. So you really are fairly redundant. If you really want something different, you're going to have to go with a flat, fast shooting 22 caliber centerfire of some kind, but that's really not your best choice for deer and elk. So if you're not doing small varmints like rock chucks, woodchucks, coyotes, that kind of thing, probably don't need one of those, but that would really stretch you out there. And the other way to go, of course, is higher, larger calibers. But if you don't want to carry around a heavy rifle, if you think your 30-06 is too heavy, you get something in a 35 Whelen or a 375 or something really big, then you're going to want more weight to moderate the recoil, and you're going to be back to where you started with too much weight. I think your 308 Winchester is probably going to do it for you, and just stick with that. But if you want longer reach, a little more trajectory, flatter trajectory, and that sort of thing, go with one of the 7mm. I have always advocated for the 7mm because it's not because 7mm, as some people say or think, have higher BCs. The cartridge doesn't have a BC, of course. The bullet does. And you can get the same high C bullet in pretty much anything if you can get a cartridge to push it fast enough and a twist rate to stabilize it. But you can get a .625 264 bullet or 277 bullet or 7mm bullet or 30 caliber bullet. It's just that the larger calibers get a little bit heavier, and then you've got more recoil. And that's why I think the 7 is the nice middle of the road compromise. Not too small, not too big, not too much recoil. You can shoot them fast and flat without knocking your shoulder off. So I like the 7 mags. But suit yourself, you're going to do just fine out to 300 yards with the 308. And the 6.5 Creedmoor with the right bullet can certainly do the job on elk. All right, let's go to Wisconsin. Jace. Hi, Ron. I have continued to love listening to your podcasts and videos. You sure are a wealth of knowledge. I currently whitetail hunt with my grandfather's Remington Model 700 chambered in 6mm Remington. It is a beautiful gun, and I would like to buy my own legacy gun similar to that, in which I could hand it down to my grandkids someday. I'm finding it difficult to find a high-gloss woodstock rifle made in the USA. I really like the Browning X-Bolt Medallion, but that's made in Japan. I know the Remington Model 700 is still made in the USA, but I have heard varying opinions on their quality in recent years. Do you have any suggestions for me for a rifle in this category? Or do you have any insight into why the high-gloss woodstock rifles made in the USA have become so hard to find? Any help is much appreciated. They're hard to find because the fashion has just changed. People back in the 50s and 60s loved that high-gloss look. But then the pragmatic hunter said, wait a minute, why do I want a mirror out there flashing an alarm to all the game that I'm hunting? How much of an issue that really is, I don't know, especially at longer ranges, but it's out there. So the woodstock rifles are going away because wood is getting more and more expensive and harder to find. And to keep the cost of rifles down, they've gone to the cheaper plastics. And you can have really cheap molded plastics, or you can get the fairly expensive hand-laid fiberglass, Kevlar, stiff layups, now carbon fiber things. But again, they don't have quite the tradition and the look and the warmth and maybe even the durability of good walnut. So if you are looking for walnut, you're going to have to pay the price. But there are still some American-made all-walnut rifles out there. And some of them are fairly reasonably priced. Some of them are actually quite reasonably priced. I'm thinking of the Mossberg Patriot. It's got just a plain wood stock, but gosh, I think their suggested retail on those is under $600, maybe even under $400. But if you want to get a fancier stock, for a while there, they were making a Revere upgraded stock, and I got one in 6.5 Creedmoor with a beautiful figured walnut stock. But the other ones are, as you mentioned, Remington is again building it, and I got one in a 30-06, and it was really well built. Had some issues with the bolt face, but once we got that fixed, it was shooting right around MOA, a little bit better with some loads, a little bit worse with others, but pretty consistently at 1 inch, and the stock was really pretty. Good quality, had just what you're looking for. Not high gloss though, satin finish. Winchester Model 70 featherweight, same thing. So you can look to those. You're probably not going to get the high gloss on anything. Now Weatherby is still making some traditional Weatherby rifles with the high gloss on the stock, in the barrel, the action, the whole bit. So you might look to a Weatherby. What else is out there? Well, you can get semi-custom guns from places like Park West Arms. That was the former Dakota. Really high quality, classic, American-made from start to finish, every piece of them. But they're pretty pricey. But whew, what gorgeous rifles, and well built and accurate. I've just loved the Park Wests. And then there are lots of custom rifle builders out there that would be more than happy to build a rifle for you. Again, going to cost some coin, but boy, are they doing some great work. So snoop around. You can certainly find that stuff. It's just not as prevalent as it used to be. Okay.
I like the fact that he's thinking about handing it down to the next generation.
Yeah, that is an interesting thing about firearms, knives. I don't know what it is, tools? There's something special about firearms and knives that you don't get with, say, hammers and saws. I'm thinking of hand tools that Grandpa used, or your dad used, or you used, or your mom used. I guess you get this in the kitchen. This was Grandma's favorite mixing bowl kind of thing, and you hand it down. But it really happens with guns, with firearms. And I think it's because of the family tradition of hunting and going out to harvest what supports the family. That's my take on it. What do you guys think? Because most of us, as soon as we hear about handing down a firearm, we think, yeah, I remember Dad's, or I remember Grandpa's. I remember going up to the old cabin in the North Woods and sitting by the fireplace as the old guys cleaned their guns after a rainy day or a snowy day, and you could smell the Hoppy's number 9, and all those memories come flooding back. And those are special tools that we hand down, not like the hammer and the saw in the barn. And that's my take on it anyway, but good point, honey. All right, let's see what Kevin has to say. He is from Idaho, and he's from the Salmon River country. Pretty dramatic stuff out there. While steelhead fishing in Oregon in 1993, I came across a gun case on the bottom of the river. I hooked it and pulled it up. Lo and behold, it contained a rifle and a scope. Of course, it was full of silt and with surface rust. Well, I cleaned it thoroughly, and I took it to a gunsmith to check out. Turned out to be a sporterized 1917 Enfield 30-06 made by Remington. Wow, that would have been during World War I. He inspected it and gave it the green light to shoot. This is pretty amazing. The scope was replaced, and I have shot many rounds through it, but the accuracy is 1.5 inches to 2. No matter what I do with the ammo of different manufacturers or reloads, I'd like to get it to shoot better, but keeping it as original as possible. Do you have any thoughts on where to start? It's got a wood stock, and that may be warped. It needs to be opened up to float the barrel, or would it need to be fully bedded? Don't really want to rebarrel it. I want to keep that original. Maybe upgrade the trigger as well? That's a debate. The goal is to improve its accuracy so it could be used for the occasional hunt, but no shooting beyond 350 yards. Can you help me improve my river gun? It's nostalgic, and it's fun to hunt with the old stuff. Thanks, Ron. I really enjoy your podcast. P.S. You are the Teflon man when it comes to the negative naysayers. That stuff just slips off you, and you keep laughing and smiling. A great attitude to have. Well, thanks so much, Kevin, and congrats on that crazy find. How many of us have reeled in an Enfield, 1917 customized Enfield from the bottom of the river? That is quite the catch. But getting it to shoot, well, first of all, 1.5 to 2 MOA is really not all that miserable for a hunting rifle, out to about 300 yards, believe it or not. Because, let's say, a 2-inch group at 100 yards is going to be a 4-inch group at 200 yards, and 6-inch group at 300 yards. 6-inch vital zone on the deer. So don't think you have to have a tack driver to have a successful hunting rifle. But I think you're on the right track with that stock. I would definitely work on that. And free floating the barrel is a great start because you can always full-length bed it afterwards if the free float doesn't work. What the full-length bedding will do, of course, is stiffen the barrel, and that helps with the vibrations and things, and sometimes that makes it work a little better. The other trick is tip pressure only. So you free float the whole thing. If that doesn't give you the accuracy, you start putting pressure at the fore-end tip, right up the fore end of the stock. You build up some pressure points, and we usually use business cards. Fold them over and slide them in there and just keep adding until you get better accuracy because of that pressure. And then you have to go in with epoxy and build up a little hump right there to mimic what you had with those cards. And then you can sand it down after you've built it up if you needed to tweak your accuracy. That sometimes works quite well too. But you also want to bed the action and the recoil lug. Get some epoxy and bed everything nice and tightly back there. Any kind of back and forth motion is going to be stopped on that one. What else could you do? Of course, you've already played around with different loads and ammo and stuff. You know those tricks. Seating your bullets in and out and all that fun stuff. Boy, beyond that, I can't think of a heck of a lot other than that trigger you're already thinking of. And I think you could stick with the same trigger and just have a gunsmith look at it, maybe hone it a little bit, lighten it up for you, see if that doesn't turn the trick for you. Boy, anybody else have any great ideas out there? Especially guys who really know the Enfield. If you're familiar with that action, you have some accuracy tricks, send those in. We'll read those, share them with Kevin and everyone else. So thanks for that good letter, Kevin, and good luck with that project. Now, Tyler from Utah. Ron, I was wondering, how much does barometric pressure and humidity affect your velocity, the bullet's velocity? Thanks for any information you can give me. Well, let's stop and think about this, Tyler. Barometric pressure, of course, is going to slow your bullet down if you have more pressure. That simply means you have denser air. So at sea level, the air is more dense than it is at 10,000 feet and on up. So you're going to get more drag on your bullet, and your velocity is going to slow down faster. Your bullet's going to drop more. That takes care of the barometric pressure issue. Humidity affects it because humid air is actually less dense than dry air. That blows me away because it feels exact opposite. But they say that if the humidity is up, the air is less dense, so your trajectory should go up. But you look at the numbers on your ballistic calculators, and it doesn't make a heck of a lot of difference on the humidity. From zero humidity up to 99%, it really doesn't make that much difference unless you're going extreme range. But at hunting ranges out to 500-600 yards, not worth worrying about. But the barometric pressures can make a fairly significant change, again, past 300 yards. And this is another one of the arguments against long-range shooting. Long-range shooting is more about making all of these calculations and compensating for them than it is hunting. You know, for me, the hunt is the thing, and the closer I can get to the animal, the more exciting it is. But I certainly understand the desire to make a good, clean shot at 250, 300 yards if the opportunity is there. And you can generally do that with most common cartridges and rifles and bullets and not have to worry about the humidity or the barometric pressure. But it's still good to know that stuff and understand it. I always say the really dedicated long-range shooters who know this stuff inside and out are the most effective long-range and short-range shots. We always say if you can hit your target pretty consistently at 600 yards, you're going to be deadly at 300 yards all the time. So the more you practice, the better you get. How about Minnesota for Christian? Ron, hunting whitetail using a suppressed M1A SOCOM with Hornady Precision Hunter 178 grain. I shot a doe at 25 yards. The round went in and hit lungs, then bounced around and didn't exit. She went down 100 yards away. I noticed that the round didn't cycle the bolt, and when I cleared it, I had a spent cartridge. 2 questions. Do you think I had just a bad round, or am I using too heavy of a bullet and should be using something lighter? If so, what do you recommend? Thanks for your videos, by the way. M1A SOCOM with the Hornady Precision. So he's an auto-loading rifle. The M1A is the Garand, I believe, or the Grand, as a lot of people pronounce it. And why didn't it cycle? Let me think. Boy, it must have been an underpowered load, because you got to have your powers fairly consistent on those autoloaders for the timing, for the thing to function. You get too light of a load and it's not going to. I wonder if guys who shoot these Garand rifles a lot, if you don't have a good solid anchor, are you not getting recoil cycling on that action? I'm not that familiar with them, but that may be one of them. There are some autoloaders that if you do not have a good solid anchor, they can't function because they're working with inertia and they have to have something to work against to cycle the action. But it sounds to me like your action didn't cycle. It's not what the bullet did inside the animal that you're worried about. It's the round didn't cycle the bolt. And when you cleared it, there was a spent cartridge. Yeah, that's pretty common with autoloaders. So it could be a dirty chamber, it could be a dirty action, slowing things down. All of those things can add up. So first thing I would do is definitely clean everything really well on it. But then look to the power of that particular load. You may have had a pretty weak load or a bad primer that didn't give a lot of fire, kind of a squib load almost. A lot of different things that could go on, but yeah, something you want to look into. And all you M1A shooters out there, write in and let us know what he is likely up against here. All right, let's see. West Virginia, Carl, looks like Carell. I have watched a number of your YouTube videos regarding sighting in a rifle and using a ballistic calculator. I've checked a number of these, including Hornady.com, Vortex, etc., but I cannot figure out how to print the ballistic cheat sheet or the graphs. What do I need to do? As I see you always have printouts. Thanks, Carl. An old-time hunter, 75. I think he means he's 75 years old. That's probably your problem. We have similar issues with computer programs. But somewhere on there should be a print button. If nothing else, save your screen. If you know how to do a screen capture or get a photograph of your screen by manipulating your buttons. I don't know, different computers work different ways, but I can do that. But my ballistic calculators always have a little box somewhere that says print when I've got my data chart. So that's the way I do it. So take a closer look at those and see if you can figure it out. Betsy?
I put that in because you could relate.
I could relate, all right. I'll suppose 4 or 5 times a day, Betsy's downstairs and she hears, "Ah! What now? I can't get this computer to work." And then she comes up and goes, "Bleep, bleep, bleep," and we're done. I hate computers. Okay. Thanks for the good memories, Carl. And good luck printing that out. See if you don't have a 4-year-old in the neighborhood. They could figure it out for you. Brett from Idaho. Golly, that's 2 from Idaho. Ron, I have always enjoyed your channel. Hey, here's a twist to your 300 Win Mag versus 338 Win Mag. I have a very well-used Vanguard in 300 Win Mag. After many years, the barrel is done. I ordered a new 338 barrel for it. The 300 Win has been filled by 2 rifles, a Winchester featherweight and a rather heavy 300 Ultra Mag. I'm wondering what you think an ideal bullet weight for elk would be. I also hunt where some grizzly things think that hunters look like chicken nuggets, so penetration and stopping power are important. Thanks, Brett. Well, Brett got a 250 grain bullet in that 338. And now you can get by with a 225 grain, but the thing about the 338, big as it is, you know, the big .338 inch diameter bullet, and everybody thinks, wow, that's getting right up there. But they really don't have what's called a high sectional density unless you get them 250 grains. So you want to get over 0.3 on your SDs on these bullets to ensure some really deep penetration. You've got the mass there, but it's kind of concentrated into a fairly short bullet. And you want a longer bullet so you've got a lot of shank behind it to continue driving the expanded nose deeper. It's kind of what you're looking for. So a 250 grain bullet will definitely give you your best chance for deep penetration and hard hit on a grizzly or the elk that you're hunting. But you're going to have more recoil with it. You might not enjoy it as much. And I think if you get a 200 to 220 grain all copper bullet, you're going to be the cat's meow right there. I have just had so much great luck with penetration and expansion using Barnes bullets and hammer bullets particularly. Those are the 2 that I use the most. And I just don't see any reason to mess around with anything else. Those are my go-tos. There's no reason why a bunch of other controlled expansion bullets won't work as well. But I know these guys work, and I can generally keep the weight down and still get the penetration of the heavier, harder recoiling bullets. Something you might want to consider. But I think you're going to do well with that. And I hope you never have to use it on a grizzly. Betsy, what are you working about? Well, you're doing this. You're saying, shut up, Ron, it's time to go.
Yeah. Do we have any more questions?
Yeah, there's a couple more on there. Let's spit one more out here. This is from Pennsylvania, and the guy's name is Dakota, so he's in the wrong place. Hey, Ron, I was wondering if you could cover different shot numbers and weights for shotgunning and what the best loads are for squirrel and also the spreads and all that fun stuff. Well, that sounds like a major YouTube video. So rather than tackling it now, Dakota. We will do another one on shotguns and pellets and chokes and all the rest of that, because it's pretty confusing to folks who are just getting into it. A lot different than rifles. All right, Michigan, finally we have Garrett. Hi, Ron, I'm 20 years old, a big fan of the podcast and your YouTube channel. I purchased a Henry Lever Action 360 buckhammer earlier this year. Today I had the chance to hunt with it in Michigan. I harvested a mature doe. Worked great. She was quartering away at about 45 yards. I placed a shot right behind the left shoulder, hit the heart and one lung before exiting in front of the right shoulder. She expired quickly, making an easy tracking job. I hope to draw a Michigan black bear tag in the next couple of years. Do you think the 360 buckhammer would be an adequate cartridge for bear at closer ranges? Maybe we will have to call it the 360 buckhammer, the 360 bear hammer. Ron and Betsy, thank you for all the videos and entertainment you have given for us to enjoy. God bless. Well, thanks, Garrett. Yeah, that 360 buckhammer bear hammer will do just fine on bears. I've used 30-30s on bears. The buckhammer's got a little more oomph than that. Bigger, a little bit heavier bullet. Bingo. Use it on bear. Have a good time. Hey, everybody, thanks for writing in, and all of your advice is really appreciated. Betsy?
Comment of the week.
Comment of the week. We have to have a comment of the week. What's the comment of the week? Well, it's time for comment of the week, and Betsy says we've got two contenders. One is Dave, 80 years old and still hunting bison and elk, and the other is just the opposite direction, 20-year-old Garrett, who's getting started in using a 360 buckhammer. Which one shall we pick? Well, guess where the bias lays here, folks. We're going for the 80-year-old. Hey, the 20-year-old's got it all in front of him, man. So he's got lots of time to get her done. But boy, 80 years old and still hunting. More power to you there, Dave. You are our comment of the week. Keep it up. Let us know what you get next season. Maybe it's time for a moose. All right, everybody. Good to have you here. See you next time. Hunt honest, shoot straight.